I am Joshua, 34 years old, and my parents just told a room full of people that I am the biggest regret of their lives. Before I tell you how I destroyed their perfect little world in less than 7 days, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. It was supposed to be a celebration. 35 years of marriage. A milestone. And like everything else in my family's life for the past decade, I was the one who made it happen. I was the one who booked the private room at the Gilded Lily, the most expensive steakhouse in the city. I was the one who coordinated with the florists to ensure the centerpieces were my mother's favorite shade of violent violet. And, naturally, I was the one who quietly handed my credit card to the maitre d' before the first bottle of vintage Cabernet was even uncorked. My father, Robert, sat at the head of the table, looking like the successful businessman he pretended to be. His suit was tailored, a gift from me last Christmas, though he told everyone he picked it up in Milan. My mother, Linda, was glowing, dripping in jewelry that I had insured. And then there was Noreen, my younger sister, the golden child. She arrived 40 minutes late, making an entrance that stopped conversation. She tossed her keys to the valet, keys to a Porsche Cayenne that I paid the lease on, and strutted in. She didn't apologize. She never apologized. She just kissed Mom on the cheek, ignored me, and took the seat directly to my father's right. "Glad you could make it, Princess," Dad said, his voice booming with a warmth he never used when speaking to me. "Traffic was a nightmare," Noreen sighed, signaling the waiter for a drink without making eye contact. "And the car is making a weird noise again. Joshua, you need to take it into the shop for me tomorrow." She didn't ask. She demanded. That was our dynamic. I was the architect, the fixer, the bank, and the servant. She was the star. I took a sip of my water. "I have a site inspection tomorrow, Noreen. Call the dealership yourself." The table went quiet. My mother's eyes narrowed, slicing through the candlelight. "Joshua," Mom said, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper. "It's your sister. Don't be difficult. Not tonight. Not on our anniversary." I didn't argue. I never argued. I just nodded, swallowed the lump of resentment that had been living in my throat for 20 years, and focused on my steak. I looked around the room. Friends, distant relatives, business associates my father wanted to impress. They were all eating food I paid for, drinking wine I selected, celebrating a couple who hadn't paid their own mortgage in 6 years. The dinner progressed. Toasts were made. People stood up and spoke about the enduring love of Robert and Linda. They spoke about family values. It was nauseating. Then Dad stood up. He tapped his knife against his wine glass. The crystal rang out, a sharp, clear sound that silenced the room. "I want to thank everyone for coming," Dad began, his face flushed with wine and ego. 35 years. It hasn't always been easy, but Linda and I have been blessed. Truly blessed. He looked down at Noreen. She beamed back at him, holding his hand. "We have a beautiful daughter," Dad continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Noreen, you are the light of our lives. You are the reason we wake up in the morning. Looking at you, seeing the woman you've become, it makes all the struggle worth it." He didn't look at me. Not once. I was sitting 3 feet away, but I might as well have been in another state. "You know," Mom chimed in, standing up to join him. She wrapped an arm around Dad and the other around Noreen. It was a perfect picture. The three of them, the Trinity. People ask us what our secret is, and I tell them it's love. It's focusing on the things that matter. She paused for dramatic effect. The room was captivated. "Sometimes," Mom said, and this time she finally looked at me, but her eyes were cold, empty. "Sometimes Robert and I talk at night, and we say to each other, we wish Noreen was our only child." The air left the room. I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. I thought I misheard. I thought it was a joke, a bad slip of the tongue. But then Dad nodded, laughing a little. "It's true. Life would have been so much simpler. Perfect, really. Noreen is everything we ever wanted." Noreen smirked. It wasn't a smile of embarrassment. It was a smirk of victory. She looked right at me, eyebrows raised, as if to say, finally, they said it out loud. The guests didn't cheer. There was an awkward ripple of nervous laughter, a few coughs. My Aunt Sarah, sitting across from me, looked down at her plate, her face turning red. She knew. Everyone knew I was the one who funded this charade. But nobody said a word. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. We wish Noreen was our only child. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just an insult. It was an erasure. 34 years of trying to please them. 34 years of good grades, a scholarship to architecture school so they wouldn't have to pay, building a firm from the ground up, paying off their debts, buying their house, leasing their cars. All of it. Erased. In their minds, I wasn't just a disappointment. I was a mistake. An obstacle to their perfect fantasy with Noreen. I carefully placed my fork down on the china. Clink. The sound was soft, but in the silence of my own head, it sounded like a gavel coming down. Judgment Day. I looked at my father. He was already pouring more wine, oblivious to the hole he had just blown through my chest. I looked at my mother. She was fixing Noreen's hair, doting on her. I didn't cry. 10-year-old Joshua would have cried. 10-year-old Joshua would have begged to know what he did wrong. But I wasn't 10 anymore. I was a man who managed multi-million-dollar construction projects. I dealt with concrete, steel, and cold, hard facts. And the fact was, I was fired. I stood up. Joshua, Mom asked, sounding annoyed that I was moving. Where are you going? They're bringing out the cake. I'm leaving, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Sit down, Dad snapped. Don't make a scene. You're embarrassing your sister. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the valet ticket for my car. Then, I pulled out my phone. I didn't look at them again. I walked toward the door. If you walk out that door, Dad threatened, his voice rising, don't bother coming by on Sunday for dinner. I stopped. I turned back one last time. I looked at the three of them, a parasite, a narcissist, and an enabler. Don't worry, I said. I won't. I walked out of the private room, past the stunned guests, and into the cool lobby of the restaurant. The maitre d' rushed over to me. Mr. Miller? Is everything all right? Should we bring the check? I looked at the man. He was a good guy. He'd known me for years. Actually, no, I said. I'm not paying for this. The man blinked. Sir, split the check, I said, pulling out $100 bill. This is for my meal and a generous tip for the server. The rest of the party, they can handle it themselves. Please take the bill to Robert Miller at the head of the table. But, sir, it's a $4,000 bill. I know, I said. Make sure he gets it before dessert. I walked out into the night air. It was crisp, felt clean. I took a deep breath, the first deep breath I had taken in years. I got into my car, the one thing I actually kept in my own name without guilt, and started the engine. I didn't go home. Not to the house I bought for them where I stayed in the guest room. I drove to the city. I pulled over in a parking lot overlooking the skyline and dialed a number. Elijah, I said when he answered. It was 9:30 p.m., but my lawyer always answered. Joshua? Everything okay? No, I said. But it's about to be. Initiate the zero option. There was a pause on the line. Elijah had been trying to get me to do this for 3 years. He knew the paperwork was ready. He knew the trusts were set up. He knew I held the keys to everything. Are you sure? Elijah asked. Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. It's scorched earth. I thought about Noreen's smirk. I thought about my father's wish. They wished I didn't exist, Elijah, I said, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I'm just granting their wish. Cut them off. Everything. Tonight. Done, Elijah said. I'll make the calls. I hung up the phone. I looked at the city lights. I was alone, but for the first time in my life I didn't feel lonely. I felt powerful. I checked into a hotel that night, the Four Seasons. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't need to. I had my credit cards, my ID, and my sanity. That was all I needed to start over. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. It was Saturday. Usually, my Saturdays were consumed by my mother's honey-do list. Fix the leaky faucet, mow the lawn because the gardener was too expensive. Even though I paid for him, drive Noreen to the mall. Today, my phone was silent. I had blocked them. All of them. I ordered room service and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. Felt surreal. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I remembered when I was 12. It was raining. A torrential downpour. I was waiting outside the middle school, shivering under a broken awning. Dad was supposed to pick me up at 3 p.m. By 5 p.m., the janitor told me he had to lock the gates. I walked 3 miles home in the rain. When I walked through the front door, soaking wet, shoes ruined, Mom looked up from the TV. "Oh, you're home," she said. We were watching Noreen's dance recital tape. We completely lost track of time. Don't drip on the carpet. That was the day I learned my value. I was an accessory, something to be stored away until needed. But today, the accessory was malfunctioning. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking portal. The zero option wasn't just a phrase. It was a strategic dismantling of the financial life support system I had built for them. First, the joint accounts. I transferred my portion, which was 100% of the funds, into a new, secure account under my name only. The balance on their joint checking account went from $15,000 to $0. Next, the credit cards. I was the primary account holder on the American Express Platinum card my father flashed around town, and the Visa Infinite card my mother used for her weekly spa days. I clicked Report Lost/Stolen, and then Close Account. I imagined the plastic cards in their wallets turning into useless scrap metal. Then the utilities. The electric bill, the water, the cable, the high-speed internet, all in my name. I scheduled the disconnects. Since it was the weekend, the physical shutoff wouldn't happen until Monday. But the internet? That was digital. I logged into the provider's site and hit Cancel Service Effective immediately. I took a sip of fresh coffee. Tasted like justice. Around noon, my secondary phone, the work line they didn't think to call often, buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. And again. I checked the transcription. It was Noreen. "Josh, where the hell are you? The Wi-Fi is down and I can't stream my show. And Dad is freaking out because his card got declined at the gas station. He had to pay cash. It was so embarrassing. Fix it. Fix it. Not please. Not are you okay?" I typed a reply. My fingers hovered over the keys. I wanted to scream. I wanted to write a novel about how much I hated them. But indifference was the weapon. I wrote, "Ask Mom and Dad. I'm not your brother anymore. Remember? I'm the child they never wanted." I hit send. Then I blocked her number on that phone too. By Sunday evening, I had signed a lease on a penthouse apartment downtown. It was sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was the kind of place a successful 34-year-old architect should live in. Not a guest room in his parents' house surrounded by high school trophies that weren't his. I stood in the empty living room. It was quiet, peaceful. Then my email pinged. It was an automated notification from the security system at the parents' house. I still had administrative access. I hadn't cut that yet because I needed to see. I needed to witness the fallout. I opened the app on my tablet. The camera feed from the living room loaded. They were all there. The lights were still on, but the tension was palpable. Dad was pacing back and forth, holding a stack of unopened mail I had left on the counter before the party. Bills I usually just paid without showing them. "He can't just do this," Dad yelled, throwing an envelope onto the coffee table. "It's illegal. It's abandonment. He's just throwing a tantrum," Mom said, dismissing him. She was filing her nails, but her hand was shaking. "He'll be back by tomorrow. He always comes back. He needs us. Who else would love him? The audacity. Who else would love him?" "I tried to buy groceries," Mom continued, her voice trembling slightly. "The card was declined, Robert. The cashier looked at me like I was a pauper. I had to put back the wine." "It's a glitch," Dad insisted. I'll call the bank on Monday and have his head on a platter. He thinks he can control us with money? I'm the head of this household. Noreen was on the sofa, scrolling frantically on her phone using her data plan. My data is almost capped. Why hasn't he fixed the Wi-Fi? This is abuse. He's literally abusing us. I watched them on the screen, these three people who supposedly loved me. They weren't worried about where I was. They weren't worried if I was hurt or dead. They were worried about wine, groceries, and Wi-Fi. I felt a final tether snap inside me. The guilt, the obligation, the lingering hope that maybe, just maybe, if I tried harder, they would see me. It all vanished. I tapped the microphone icon on the app. The security camera had a two-way audio feature. I can hear you, I said into the tablet. On the screen, they all jumped. Dad spun around, looking for the source of the voice. Joshua. Mom looked at the ceiling. Joshua, stop this nonsense right now. Come home and apologize. I'm not coming home, I said. My voice amplified through the speaker in their living room. And I'm not fixing the glitch. There is no glitch. The accounts are closed. The money is gone. You wanted Noreen to be your only child? Congratulations. You're on your own. You ungrateful brat. Dad screamed at the camera. After everything we did for you, we gave you life. And I gave you a lifestyle, I countered. But the subscription has expired. You can't do this. Noreen shrieked. I have a hair appointment on Tuesday. Who's going to pay for it? Get a job, Noreen, I said. I'm calling the police, Dad threatened. Go ahead, I said. Tell them your adult son stopped paying your bills. See how that works out for you. I pressed the button to disable the user accounts for the security system, locking them out of the app, but keeping my own access. Then I turned off the tablet. I sat in the dark of my new penthouse. I felt lighter, but I knew this was just the beginning. Monday was coming, and Monday meant the real world was going to crash into them like a freight train. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was at my office by 7 a.m. My firm, Miller & Associates, was my sanctuary. I had built it from nothing, despite my father telling everyone he consulted for me. The truth was, he couldn't read a blueprint if his life depended on it. I sat at my desk, reviewing the structural plans for a new museum we were bidding on. But my mind was on the checklist Elijah and I had drafted. Item 3, the assets. At 9:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Sarah. Josh, honey, are you okay? Your mom called me screaming. She says you stole their money. I told her that was impossible, but she's hysterical. I texted back, I didn't steal anything, Aunt Sarah. I just stopped giving them mine. I'm fine. Better than fine. At 10 a.m., the first real blow landed. I had arranged for the lease on Noreen's Porsche to be terminated. Technically, it was a voluntary repossession because I, the leaseholder, requested it. But to Noreen, it wouldn't feel voluntary. I wasn't there to see it, but the security camera footage I reviewed later was cinematic. A flatbed tow truck pulled into the driveway. A large man in a neon vest walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Noreen answered, wearing a silk robe I had bought her for Christmas. I could see her gesturing wildly. She pointed at the car. She pointed at the house. She stomped her foot. The man simply checked his clipboard, shook his head, and walked over to the Porsche. He began hooking it up. Noreen ran out barefoot, screaming. She actually tried to physically block the truck. This is my car. My brother pays for it. Call him. Call him right now. The driver ignored her, winched the shining black SUV onto the bed, and drove off. Noreen was left standing in the driveway, looking small and ridiculous. But the real storm was hitting my father. Robert Miller liked to play the role of the tycoon. He had a consulting business that hadn't turned a profit since 2018. For 2 years, I had been funneling money into his business account under the guise of an angel investor LLC. I did it to save his pride. I did it so he wouldn't feel like a failure. Whatever. At 11 a.m., I instructed the LLC's lawyer to formally withdraw all funding and demand immediate repayment of the short-term loans. Dad was at his office, a rented co-working space, when he must have gotten the email. How did I know? Because at 11:15 a.m., the reception desk at my firm called me. Mr. Miller? Your father is on line 1. He sounds distressed. Take a message, I said. He says it's a life or death emergency. Tell him I'm in a meeting. I wasn't in a meeting. I was playing solitaire. By the afternoon, the reality was setting in. The credit cards were dead. The car was gone. The business capital had evaporated. I decided to check the camera feed one more time before cutting off my own emotional supply. The living room was a war zone. Dad was red-faced, tie loosened, pacing. Mom was crying on the sofa, holding a glass of wine, probably the last bottle. Noreen was pacing, thumbing her phone furiously. He's trying to ruin us, Dad roared. My own son. I knew he was jealous. He's always been jealous of Noreen. Jealous? Mom sobbed. He's evil. He's cruel. How could he leave us without resources? I can't go to the club tomorrow. I can't face the girls if I can't pay for lunch. We have to make him stop, Noreen said, her voice sharp. We have to go to him. Force him to sign the checks. He's weak, Dad. You know he's weak. He always caves if you yell loud enough. You're right, Dad said, slamming his fist into his hand. He's hiding at his office. Coward. We're going down there. Tomorrow morning. We'll make a scene. He hates scenes. He'll pay anything to make us shut up. I watched them plotting. They really didn't know me at all. They thought I was the same scared little boy who just wanted Daddy to be proud. They didn't realize they were dealing with a man who negotiated contracts with steel unions and city planners. They were bringing a knife to a nuclear war. I picked up my office phone. Susan? Cancel my appointments for tomorrow morning. And tell security we might have some uninvited guests. I want the Level 3 protocols in place. Level 3, sir? The police escort protocol. Yes, and Susan, if they show up, let them into the lobby. Let them get comfortable. I want to handle this personally. I went home to my penthouse that night and slept like a baby. The detachment was complete. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clinical. They were a structural flaw in the foundation of my life, and I was simply excavating the rot. Tuesday morning. The atmosphere in my firm was hushed, professional, efficient. Architects were bent over drafting tables. Phones were ringing softly. It was a machine of productivity. I was in the main conference room, a glass-walled aquarium of power overlooking the city. Sitting across from me was Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a legend in real estate development. He was worth billions. He was also the closest thing I had to a father figure, though I'd never tell him that. We were finalizing the contract for the Skyline Tower, the biggest project of my career. Your designs are bold, Joshua, Henderson said, tapping the blueprints. I like bold, but are you sure you have the bandwidth? I hear rumors of family troubles. News traveled fast in our circles. Structural stress tests are part of the job, Arthur, I said smoothly. My foundation is solid. The distractions are being removed as we speak. As if on cue, the elevator doors in the lobby chimed. Through the glass walls, I saw them. Dad was wearing his power suit, but it looked rumpled. Mom was wearing sunglasses indoors, trying to look like a celebrity but looking more like a hangover victim. Noreen was trailing behind them, looking furious, holding her phone up as if she were recording for TikTok. They marched past the reception desk. Susan, my receptionist, stood up. Sir, you can't go back there, she called out, acting her part perfectly. Get out of my way, Dad shouted. His voice echoed through the open-plan office. Architects looked up. Engineers stopped typing. I'm here to see my son. Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. Is that the distraction? I said, standing up. Excuse me for a moment, Arthur. I walked out of the conference room and met them in the center of the bullpen. I stood tall, buttoning my jacket. I didn't look like their son. I looked like the CEO. Robert. Linda. Noreen. I said, using their names, not their titles. To what do I owe the displeasure? Don't you play cool with me, Dad yelled, pointing a finger in my face. You cut off the cards. You stole my business capital. You humiliated your sister. I didn't steal anything, I said, my voice projecting clearly so my staff could hear. I stopped investing in a failing venture. And as for the cards, I stopped paying for adults who refused to work. Work? Noreen shrieked. I'm an influencer. My image is my work. You took my car. How am I supposed to go to events? Take the bus, I said. A few of my employees stifled laughs. Mom stepped forward, pulling down her sunglasses to reveal puffy eyes. She went for the emotional jugular. Joshua, how can you be so cruel? We are your family. We love you. We want what's best for everyone. You wish Noreen was your only child, I quoted. I'm just giving you what's best for you. That was a joke, Dad roared. A joke at a party. You're going to destroy us over a joke. It wasn't a joke, Robert, I said. It was the truth. You've been bleeding me dry for 10 years. You've used my money to pretend you're successful, while treating me like the help. It's over. Dad looked around. He saw the staff watching. He saw Mr. Henderson standing in the doorway of the conference room. He decided to double down. You listen to me, Dad hissed. You are nothing without me. I made you, and I can break you. If you don't reactivate those accounts right now, I will sue you for elder abuse. I'll tell everyone what a horrible, ungrateful son you are. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Sue me? I asked. With what lawyer? You can't afford a lawyer. You can't even afford the gas to get home. Mr. Henderson walked up then. He was an imposing man, taller than my father. Is there a problem here, Joshua? Henderson asked, his voice like gravel. Dad's eyes went wide. He recognized Arthur Henderson. Everyone knew Henderson. Dad instantly shifted gears, putting on his fake charm. Mr. Henderson, Robert Miller, pleasure. I'm just having a little dispute with my son here. You know how it is, family business. He extended his hand. Henderson didn't take it. He looked at Dad's hand, then at his face with pure disgust. I don't know how it is, Henderson said, because I respect my children, and I respect Joshua. He's one of the finest men I know. If you are harassing him, you are harassing me. Dad's hand dropped. He shrank. He looked small. Now, I said, checking my watch, I have a skyscraper to build. Security? 2 uniformed guards stepped forward. They weren't the regular lobby guys. These were the hired muscle I brought in. Escort these trespassers out, I ordered. If they return, call the police. You can't do this, Mom wailed as a guard took her elbow. This is our son's office. I'm not your son, I said, turning my back on them. I'm just the bank, and the bank is closed. Noreen tried to lunge at me, screaming obscenities, but the guard blocked her easily. As they were dragged toward the elevators, kicking and screaming, the entire office was silent. Then, as the elevator doors closed on their contorted, angry faces, someone started clapping. Then someone else. Soon the whole office was applauding. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He offered me a rare smile. Good man, Henderson said. Never let anchors drag down the ship. Now, where were we on the steel reinforcements? We went back to work. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from Elijah. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 is ready. The eviction notice is being served on Friday. I smiled. The office confrontation was just the appetizer. The main course was coming, and it was going to be served cold. Friday came, the day of reckoning. I knew exactly what time the process server would arrive at the house. 4 p.m. I wanted to be there. Not physically, that would be dangerous, but virtually. And I wanted to deliver the news myself. I drove to Elijah's office. We sat in his conference room, a camera set up to record the video call I was about to make. At 4:05 p.m., my phone blew up. Dad, Mom, Noreen, calling simultaneously. I answered a FaceTime call from Dad. I projected it onto the big screen. Dad's face filled the monitor. He was purple with rage. He was standing in the foyer of the house with the marble floors I paid for, the crystal chandelier I bought. "What is this?" Dad screamed, shaking a sheaf of papers at the camera. "Some guy just handed me an eviction notice. An eviction notice. For my own house." "It's not your house, Robert," I said calmly. "Are you insane?" Mom's face appeared next to his. She looked terrified. "We've lived here for 20 years. It's our home." "Read the deed, Mom," I said. "I know what the deed says," Dad yelled. "It says Miller Family Trust. That's me. I'm the Miller family." "No," I said. "Elijah, would you explain it to them?" Elijah leaned into the frame, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, 10 years ago, when your business was facing bankruptcy, you were about to lose the house to the bank. You remember that?" Dad went quiet. Of course he remembered. He had begged me to help. "Joshua stepped in," Elijah continued. "He bought the debt. He paid off the bank. And in exchange, the title was transferred to the Miller Family Trust. You assumed you were the beneficiaries." "We are," Dad insisted. "Actually," Elijah said, opening a file, "the sole beneficiary of the Miller Family Trust is Joshua Miller. You were listed as tenants at will. That means you live there at the pleasure of the owner. And the owner has decided to terminate your tenancy." Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. I watched their faces crumble. They looked at the papers, then at the phone, then at the walls of the house they thought they owned. You own the house?" Noreen asked, her voice trembling. She was standing in the background. "So, you can just kick us out?" "I can," I said. "And I am. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property and thrown in a dumpster." "Where are we supposed to go?" Mom cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "We have no money. We have no credit. You can't do this to your parents." "Why not?" I asked. "You wished Noreen was your only child. If Noreen was your only child, who would have saved the house 10 years ago? No one. You would have been on the street back then. I just gave you a 10-year extension. You're welcome." "Joshua, please," Dad begged. His pride was gone. He was pleading now. "Son, don't do this. We're old. We can't start over. We're sorry." "Okay. We're sorry about the toast. It was stupid. We didn't mean it." "You meant it," I said. "You meant every word. You just didn't think there would be consequences." "I'll do anything," Dad said. "I'll put you in the will. I don't want your will," I snapped. "I have 10 times the money you ever had. I don't want your money. I wanted a father. I wanted a mother. But those positions are vacant." I leaned into the camera. "Pack your bags. Leave the keys on the counter. And if you steal so much as a light bulb, I will prosecute you for theft. Do you understand?" Dad looked at me with pure hatred. The mask was back on. "You will rot in hell for this." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'll own the building." I ended the call. I sat back in the chair. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cord. Elijah poured me a glass of whiskey. "You okay?" "I'm free," I said. Author's note. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for being patient with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me by liking this video and commenting 1 below, so I know you've journeyed with me to this point. This not only helps more people find this story, but it lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The weekend of the move was a spectacle. I hired a moving crew for them. Not because I was kind, but because I wanted them out fast and I didn't want them damaging my property. I also hired off-duty police officers to supervise. I didn't go. I couldn't bear to watch the physical dismantling of my childhood home. But Aunt Sarah did. She went to help, but mostly she went to report back to me. She met me for coffee on Monday morning. "It was awful, Josh," she said, shaking her head, though I could see a hint of grim satisfaction in her eyes. "Your mother was trying to take the curtains, the drapes. The officer had to tell her they were fixtures and belonged to the house. She screamed that she picked them out. He told her she didn't own them. And Dad, he just sat in his chair until the movers literally picked it up with him in it," Sarah said. "He kept muttering about how he was going to sue you. But then," she paused, "then he tried to call his friends, asking for a place to stay. Just for a few days, he said." "Let me guess," I said. "Everyone was busy. Suddenly, the whole town is fully booked," Sarah smirked. "People talk, Josh. They know what happened at the restaurant. They know you cut them off. And without your money backing them, nobody wants to be around Robert and Linda. They're toxic assets." "Where did they go?" I asked. "A 2-bedroom apartment on the south side, near the industrial park." I nodded. I knew the complex. It was safe, but it was ugly. Thin walls, stained carpets, smell of boiled cabbage in the hallways. A far cry from the marble floors and vaulted ceilings they were used to. "And Noreen," Sarah laughed. "Oh, that's the best part. Carter dumped her." Carter was Noreen's boyfriend of the month. A wannabe model who only dated her because she bought him things, with my money. "He showed up to help them move," Sarah recounted. "He took one look at the rental truck, asked Noreen where the Porsche was, and when she told him it was repossessed, he literally laughed. He told her, 'I don't date broke girls,' and drove off." "Ouch," I said. "She had a meltdown in the front yard, screaming that you ruined her love life. But honestly, Josh, you saved her from a gold digger. Not that she sees it that way." The weeks that followed were quiet for me, but loud for them. I didn't have to check the cameras anymore. I had blocked them everywhere. But in a small town, you hear things. I heard that Dad tried to get a job. He went to his old golf buddies asking for consulting work. They laughed him out of the room. He ended up taking a job as a greeter at a hardware store. It was honest work, but for a man like Robert Miller, it was a fate worse than death. I heard Mom tried to keep up appearances. She went to her usual hair salon, but when her card was declined again, they asked her to leave. She ended up buying box dye from the drugstore. Her hair turned a tragic shade of orange. And Noreen? She had to get a job at a diner. A real job. Standing on her feet, serving coffee to truckers, getting yelled at for cold eggs. I drove past once just to see. I saw her through the window, wearing a stained apron, looking exhausted. She looked miserable, but she also looked real. For the first time in her life, she was actually doing something. The biggest fallout, however, was between them. Without me as the common enemy to exploit, and without my money to smooth over the cracks, they turned on each other. A neighbor at their apartment complex, a friend of a friend, told me the police were called twice for noise complaints. Screaming matches. "It's your fault we're here," Dad would yell. "If you hadn't spoiled Noreen, Joshua wouldn't have snapped." "My fault," Mom would scream back. "You're the one who made that stupid toast. You're the one who insulted him to his face." "I hate you both," Noreen would chime in. "You promised me I'd be taken care of. You lied." They were eating each other alive. I sat in my penthouse, looking over the blueprints for the Skyline Tower. My life was calm. My bank account was growing. My career was soaring. I missed having a family. I missed the idea of Sunday dinners. But I realized I was mourning a fantasy. The reality was what was happening in that cramped apartment on the south side. I had cut out the cancer. It left a scar, sure. But at least the patient was going to survive. Dui de la fan 7 va fan 8 qua ka chuyen. Duok viet teep noi lean mok voice 6 fan truok bang tiang on my. Dam bao kak tu chi ve cam suck. Du dai va tin kich tin ma ban you ka. Time is a funny thing. When you are suffering, a day feels like a decade. But when you are free, a year goes by in the blink of an eye. It has been exactly 12 months since the family party at the Gilded Lily. 12 months since I walked out, 12 months since I cut the financial umbilical cord, and 12 months since I started breathing oxygen instead of guilt. Tonight, I was standing on the rooftop terrace of the Skyline Tower. My building was finally complete. It pierced the clouds, a jagged shard of glass and steel that reflected the city lights below. It was bold. It was unapologetic. It was everything I had been too afraid to be for 34 years. The launch party was in full swing. But unlike the dinner with my parents, this wasn't a gathering of sycophants and debt-ridden pretenders. These were titans of industry, city officials, and artists. And they were here for me. Joshua, a deep voice rumbled beside me. It was Arthur Henderson. He held 2 flutes of champagne, offering one to me. You did it, son. You actually did it. I took the glass, the cold condensation grounding me. We did it, Arthur. You took a risk on me when my own blood was betting against me. Arthur took a sip, looking out over the railing. Blood is biology, Joshua. Loyalty is a choice. Never forget that. I smiled. It was a lesson I had learned the hard way. My phone buzzed in my tuxedo pocket. For a split second, a phantom anxiety gripped my chest. The old reflex of thinking it was Mom demanding money or Noreen screaming about a broken nail. But that life was gone. I checked the screen. It was Elijah. Security alert at the front desk. You need to come down. Quietly. My stomach tightened. I excused myself from Arthur and took the private elevator down to the lobby. The silence of the descending car gave me a moment to armor myself. I adjusted my cufflinks. I checked my reflection in the mirrored walls. I wasn't the scared boy anymore. I was the CEO of Miller and Associates. When the doors opened, I saw the commotion near the entrance. 2 security guards were blocking a woman. She was small, frail-looking, wearing a coat that was clearly too thin for the autumn chill. Her hair, once dyed a perfect, expensive blonde, was now a dull gray, pulled back in a messy bun. It was my mother, Linda. I hadn't seen her in a year. The shock of her appearance almost knocked the wind out of me. She looked 10 years older. The haughty, perfectly manicured woman who used to preside over the country club was gone. In her place was someone tired, worn down by the friction of a life without a cushion. I signaled the guards to stand down but stay close. I walked over. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the anger I thought I would feel. Instead, there was just a hollow sadness. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, the same weaponized tears she had used to manipulate me for decades. But this time, the desperation in them looked real. "Joshua," she choked out, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. Her hand fell to her side, trembling. "Oh, look at you. You look magnificent, like a king." "What do you want, Linda?" I asked. "You're not on the guest list." I know, she stammered, wringing her hands. I saw the news. The building is beautiful. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see you." "You've seen me," I said. "Now, please leave before you cause a scene." "I can't leave," she burst out, her voice rising to that hysterical pitch I knew so well. "Joshua, please, you have to listen. It's your father. He's sick." I felt a twinge in my chest. "Sick? His heart," she sobbed. "The stress, the move, working at that awful hardware store, standing on his feet all day. He collapsed last week. The doctors say he needs surgery. A bypass. It's expensive, Joshua. We don't have insurance. The state aid has a waiting list of 6 months. He doesn't have 6 months." She fell to her knees right there in the lobby of my Triumph. "Please, I know we hurt you. I know we were awful. But he's your father. If you don't help, he's going to die. Is that what you want? Do you want his death on your conscience?" People were starting to look. The reception staff, the guests arriving late. It was the perfect trap. Public humiliation mixed with moral blackmail. The old Linda Miller special. For a moment I wavered. I looked at this broken woman on the floor. I thought about my father, the man who taught me how to tie a tie before he stopped caring about me. Did I want him dead? No. I wasn't a monster. But then I remembered the toast. We wish Noreen was our only child. I remembered the years of neglect. I remembered that they only called me son when the checkbook was needed. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. Mom's eyes lit up. She thought I was reaching for a checkbook. She started to stand up, a glimmer of hope and greed returning to her face. But I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a report from the private investigator I had hired to keep tabs on them, just in case something like this happened. I had received it 2 days ago. Get up, I said quietly. She stood up, looking confused. Joshua? The check. There is no heart condition, Mom, I said, my voice cold as ice. She froze. What? How can you say that? The doctors. I have Dad's medical records right here. I tapped the paper against my palm. He didn't collapse from a heart attack. He fell off a ladder at the hardware store because he was hungover. He has a bruised rib and a sprained ankle. That's it. He was discharged 3 hours later. Her face went pale. The tears stopped instantly. The mask slipped. You spied on us? She hissed. I protected myself, I corrected. You came here on the biggest night of my life to lie to me, to scam me, again. We have nothing, she screamed, abandoning the sick husband act. We are living in a rat hole. We are eating canned soup, while you live in a penthouse and drink champagne. It's not fair. You owe us. We raised you. You didn't raise me, I said, stepping closer, my voice low and dangerous. You endured me, and then you exploited me, and now, you're irrelevant to me. I signaled the guards. They stepped forward, their shadows falling over her. I have one thing for you, I said. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a glossy brochure. I pressed it into her hand. What is this? She asked, looking at the picture of a smiling nurse on the cover. It's a brochure for Sunny Meadows, I said. It's a state-subsidized nursing home. I sit on the board of directors. It's clean, safe, and they have excellent social workers who can help you and Dad navigate your new reality. She stared at the brochure as if it were toxic waste. A nursing home? You want to put us in a home? I'm not putting you anywhere, I said. I'm giving you information. If you can't pay your rent, this is your best option. It's the only help you will ever get from me. I hate you, she shrieked, throwing the brochure at my chest. I wish you were never born. I know, I said, brushing the paper off my tuxedo. You made that very clear last year. Now, get out. The guards took her arms. She struggled, screaming obscenities, cursing my name, cursing the building, cursing the world. But as they dragged her through the revolving doors and out into the cold night, I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel guilt. I felt lighter than air. I turned back to the elevators. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, ironically, looked at me with wide eyes. Mr. Miller, are you okay? I adjusted my jacket. I checked my reflection again. The man in the mirror was smiling. A real, genuine smile. I'm perfect, Sarah, I said. I'm absolutely perfect. I went back up to the roof. The party was louder now. The music was thumping. I found Arthur again. He looked at me, saw the look in my eyes, and nodded. He didn't ask. He knew. I walked over to the edge of the roof and looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, in the grid of lights, my parents and sister were living the consequences of their actions. They were struggling, yes, but they were also free. Free to sink or swim on their own merits. And I was free to fly. Later that night, after the guests had left, I received a text message. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Noreen. I hesitated before opening it. I hadn't spoken to her since the eviction. The message was a picture. It was a selfie. She was wearing a diner uniform, her hair tied back in a net. She looked tired. There were no filters, no makeup, but she was smiling a little. In her hand, she held a pay stub. The caption read, First promotion. Shift supervisor. It's not a Porsche, but I earned it. Don't worry, I'm not asking for money. Just thought you should know. I stared at the photo. For the first time in 28 years, I saw my sister. Not the golden child. Not the parasite. Just a human being trying. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. But I didn't block her either. I put the phone away and walked to the center of the empty ballroom. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the moon. I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a belly laugh that echoed off the glass walls. I had won. Not just the game or the money or the house. I had won my life. 2 weeks after the opening of the Skyline Tower, I decided to take a drive. I went down to the garage of my building. Parked in the reserved spot wasn't a practical sedan or a showy SUV. It was a vintage 1967 Mustang Fastback, painted a deep, midnight blue. It was the car I had dreamed of since I was 16. Back then, I had a poster of it on my wall, right next to the drafting table where I did my homework while Noreen was out partying. Dad used to make fun of that poster. "Dream on, kid," he'd say. "You'll be driving a minivan like the rest of the drones." I ran my hand over the cold metal of the hood. I had restored it myself over the last 6 months. Every weekend, instead of fixing my parents' leaky roof or mowing their lawn, I was in a private garage, grease under my fingernails, rebuilding the engine. It was my therapy. It was my meditation. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. A guttural mechanical growl that vibrated through the steering wheel and into my bones. I drove out of the city, heading west toward the Pacific Coast Highway. The drive was hypnotic. The ocean on one side, the cliffs on the other. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. I rolled the windows down. The wind whipped through the cabin, smelling of salt and sage. I thought about the song lyrics that had been stuck in my head for days. That old song about a demon and a fire. The demon is me, hide and seek. For so long, I had believed I was the demon. My parents had convinced me that my desire for boundaries was selfishness, that my need for respect was arrogance, that my refusal to be their doormat was a betrayal of the family covenant. I had hidden my true self, the ambitious, creative, powerful part of me, because I thought it was ugly. I thought it was unlovable. But as the wind roared in my ears, I realized the truth. The demon wasn't me. The demon was the lie. The lie that said love is transactional. The lie that said you owe your life to the people who gave birth to you, even if they treat you like livestock. I pulled over at a scenic overlook. I killed the engine and sat in the silence, listening to the waves crash against the rocks below. I thought about Noreen, that picture of her pay stub. Strange. By cutting her off, by ruining her life, I might have actually saved her. If I had continued to fund her lifestyle, she would have remained a 28-year-old toddler, incapable of survival. Now, she was learning. She was suffering, yes, but suffering is the forge of character. Maybe she would hate me forever. Maybe she would grow old blaming me for her hard life. Or maybe, just maybe, 10 years from now, she would realize that the day the Porsche was towed was the first day of her real life. And Dad? Mom? I checked in with Aunt Sarah occasionally. They were still in the apartment. Dad was still at the hardware store, though he complained to anyone who would listen that he was an executive consultant on sabbatical. Mom had started babysitting for neighbors to make extra cash. It was a humble life, a normal life, the kind of life millions of people live with dignity every day. They were miserable because they believed they were owed a palace. But they were alive. They had a roof. They had food. And most importantly, they had each other. The perfect couple they always claimed to be. I had given them exactly what they asked for. I removed the interference. I removed the mistake. I got out of the car and walked to the edge of the cliff. The vastness of the ocean made me feel small, but in a good way. It reminded me that my family drama, as consuming as it had been, was just a tiny speck in the universe. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air. I wasn't lonely. I had Elijah, who was more of a brother to me than Noreen ever was. I had Arthur Henderson, who mentored me with the patience of a father. I had my staff, my work family, who respected me and challenged me. I had found my tribe. I looked down at my hands. These hands had built skyscrapers. They had signed contracts worth millions. And they had finally, painfully severed the chains of abuse. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was the receipt from that night at the Gilded Lily. The one I had kept in my wallet for a year as a reminder. Table 4. Total, $4,200. Paid by Joshua Miller. I looked at it one last time. Then I let it go. The wind caught the paper. It danced in the air for a moment, a white moth fluttering against the darkening sky, before it spiraled down into the churning white foam of the ocean. Gone. I turned back to my car. The 1967 Mustang sat there, gleaming under the twilight. It was a machine of beauty and power. It was mine. I got in, turned the key, and didn't look back. The road ahead was empty, wide, and waiting. Friends, thank you for riding shotgun with me on this journey. It wasn't an easy story to tell, but it was a necessary one. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my experience, it is this: toxic family members are not a life sentence. Society tells us that blood is thicker than water. We are conditioned to believe that we must endure abuse, manipulation, and disrespect simply because it comes from a parent or a sibling. We are told that setting boundaries is an act of betrayal. That is a lie. True family is built on respect, not DNA. Love is an action, not an obligation. If you are setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, and they are complaining that you aren't burning bright enough, it is time to walk away. Financial abuse is real abuse. Emotional neglect is real neglect. You have the right to protect your peace, your wallet, and your sanity. You have the right to redefine who your family is. It will be painful. It will be scary. You will feel guilty. But on the other side of that guilt is freedom. On the other side is the life you were meant to live. Now, I want to hear from you. This is the most important part of our conversation. Have you ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a family member to save yourself? Or maybe you're struggling with that decision right now. I want you to drop a comment below. Share your freedom moment. That moment you realized you had to choose yourself. Or, if this story resonated with you and you agree that self-respect is more important than toxic loyalty, just comment the word good below. Seeing your good comments lets me know that this message landed, and that we are building a community of people who refuse to be victims. Thank you for listening. Thank you for validating my truth. And remember, you are the architect of your own life. Don't let anyone else hold the blueprints. Until next time.